Welcome back. Let's continue where we left off. What I'm going to do now is go through looking at image searching. Image search will depend on your own view. Search terms can save you time. The very best find is a seamless texture repeat. Let me show you what I mean by seamless. When you see this crocodile texture repeat, it has lines running through it on the edges of the image. You can distinctly see the dark and light and the cutters motive. These are referred to as seams, or the suede that we will be editing shortly. The denim, on the other hand, is seamless. You cannot see any of these lines. So, I'll search for seamless leather texture, or seamless denim texture, or seamless suede texture, and when I click onto Google Images, a myriad of examples are available. Generally, I search for lighter colors with very distinct textures. I can change the color and clarity later, but I start with the best possible for my needs. As I'm sure you are aware, there are many websites that sell images, and there are others that allow free downloads if you give them your details, and others, like Adobe Photoshop, that allow you 10 free images in your first month when you sign up and hand over the credit card details. You must decide what your needs are. For myself, I find that I get by well on free stuff from the internet and my own photographs if need be. If I can't find this image repeat, nothing is lost because I can edit this in Photoshop. I'll demonstrate using the suede file here. I'll start with my internet search. As you can see, when I use the search term seamless before suede leather texture, my options are slightly limited. But when I just use the search term suede leather texture, my options broaden. What am I looking for? Firstly, I'm looking for a light color, and as much consistency of shade and color across the image. Also, good definition of the text. I'll select this one. It's the same one I supplied you. I'll right-click and Save Image As to save it to my file, and I'll open it in Photoshop. Immediately I can check the image size here. Image size. I'll uncheck Resample and make the image 150 pixels per inch. This image is an excellent size for what I needed to do. First, I'll check consistency. I'm using Offset to do this. Let us do this to show you what Offset is doing. Do you recognize that circle with the quarters of color in it? And the two sets of half circles? We did this in Illustrator and we created the offset repeat. I'll show you what we do here. I go to Filter in the drop-down menu, Other, and Offset. I check Preview and Wrap Around, and now I can check the consistency by moving the sliders of both the options up and down and left and right. I'll adjust this so that the edges are crossing in the middle of the image. Let me see how something that looks fairly consistent is in fact not so. I can now edit away these lines. For this swatch, I'm using the Plain Stamp tool. For an in-depth explanation of this tool, go to Retouch and Prepare Photos in Adobe Help. You can just click onto the link in the transcript below. I'll target areas and copy or clone the targeted area over the line in the center of the image. To target an area, I select the Plain Stamp tool and hover over an area and hold the Alt or Option key down, and the target symbol appears. Now, when I click my cursor onto the area, it is targeted. And when I move my cursor away to the area I want to retouch, you will see a preview of the area you are copying in the brush. Let me just talk to you about brush tip size and hardness. In the option bar next to the clone stamp tool symbol here, you'll see a black dot with a number under it. When I click onto the down arrow, I have options for size and hardness. Size will really depend on the detail and the area you're trying to retouch, and it is best to choose a brush with a slightly blurred edge, so you don't have any hard edges to your retouching. Hardness, I do around 75%. The keyboard shortcuts for a bigger and smaller brush are the left and right square brackets. I'll select the area I like best and copy this mainly through the center of the image. Once I've done this, I'll go back to Offset here at the top of the drop-down menu, and it will offset with the same value as before. Now I can tidy up the middle again. The receipt should be ready to use now. I'll just save this as a Photoshop file, so .psd. Let's do another texture before we test things in Illustrator. I'll review the whole process using the cork swatch, and I'll list the processes and briefly describe each step. Firstly, I'll open the image size dialog box. As you can see, this is an enormous swatch. I'll change the resolution to 150 ppi, and I'll check Resample now and change the centimeter size to a width of 5 centimeters. With the link selected, it automatically changes the size proportionately. Can you see when I do this, the pixel, the px dimension, come right down, and the size of the file is now much smaller. I'll accept this, and the image looks much smaller. If you double-click the hand tool, the image will immediately be larger on the screen. Don't worry if it gets a little blurry. You won't see this when you use it as a fill. Now, we'll offset this image. This image is environment, so when you edit the scene, which is not that noticeable, do this in a straight line. Once this is done, save this file as a Photoshop file, a .psd file. Before we go back to Illustrator to check these repeats, I'm going to make this crocodile skin into a repeat, and I'll use some slightly different methods to do this. First, I'll change the background layer to be an editable layer. You'll remember, for the first swatch I showed you, we went into Layers, Make Layer from Background. This time I'm showing you just to double-click on the lock. I'll do a horizontal mark here over the middle of the image and copy this, Command or Control C, and create a new layer. Do you see this little symbol here? It is the same symbol we have in Illustrator for a new brush or a new swatch or whatever it is you want to do that's new, and in this case, in Photoshop, it's a new layer. I'd like to paste the copied piece into the new layer. I must remember to click into that layer in the Layers panel, and then Command or Control V to paste it. Now I'll make this layer, the top layer, invisible. Select the bottom layer and offset it up and down only. I put a value of 0 in the left to right offset. Can you see that very strong line? I make the top layer visible again, and I'll use the eraser to soften the edge of the image in the top layer. First, I make the opacity 100%, and then I check that the brush has a soft edge, as I did with the Clone Stamp Tool brush. Now I merge the two layers. I'll click into the panel drop-down menu here and go to Merge Layers, or the keyboard shortcut for this is Command or Control E. Now I use the Clone Stamp Tool to integrate the pasted piece. Can you see how I select a scale and I copy the full scale, so my eye is on the area I have targeted? It is a little bit counterintuitive, but it does work, believe me. Next, I'll offset this image from left to right, leaving the up and down value at 0. Can you see how light the right side is? I'll copy the left side, the darker side, as this is more consistent with the rest of the swatch, and I'll paste it in a new layer. I select the new layer, and here what I want to do is reflect the piece that I copied. So I'll go to Edit in the drop-down menu, Transform, and click Horizontal to mirror the center panel. I'll move it over to the right and cover up the right area, and merge the top and bottom layers, and integrate the lines with the Clone Stamp Tool. Once I've done that, I'll check the image size. This is a very large image. Remember, we will be using it as a repeat swatch that will be scaled, so it's best to make it small enough and to still look clear in the shoe. I leave Resample checked and change the resolution to 150 pixels per inch. Immediately the dimensions change to 18336 by 1222. I'll make the image even smaller now by changing the centimeter dimension to 10 centimeters by 7 centimeters. This can now be saved as a Photoshop file and placed into Illustrator to use. I'll demonstrate this in the next video, but in the meantime, you should just have a little bit more of a play with these processes.